Board games, board games. We might be talking about board games, but we're not gonna shout. We might be talking about missions in games. These might be things you find in a campaign. We have been making levels recently. There's Kirsten who has been designing with me. I've been developing and doing my bit. And we're working on Questable, and hopefully it'll be a hit along with Ovation. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. 10 a.m. is UK time for Busy Beats and Board Game Blether. Episode 900. Oh no, that's completely the wrong thing. I do apologise. Episode 986, and we're talking about missions. Why are we talking about missions, Kirsten?
Because we've been working on them so diligently together for quite some time now.
Yes, and for those who aren't already aware, I've been talking about it a few times. Kirsten Lunde won the 2020, what was last year, 2022 LDEC Design Contest, and with a game called Questable, which was just fantastic. And the first submission was like, hey, here's an idea. And it's like, well, at least get a basic structure of like 20 missions. What was that second submission? Was it 20?
I think it was about 27. I just kept going until I went, okay, I've got to get this in.
With that, you really showed the scope of the possibilities. And along the way, in our chats, we've been kind of uncovering more things. Like when we chatted about, oh, maybe the table doesn't need to be clear, then we thought, well, what if in some of the missions the table does need to be clear? And then that sparked the idea of having like 5 things in a column. And we've been having some chats where it's been good, like brainstorming. Sometimes we've done more, sometimes we've done less, and that's the way that creativity goes. But it's different making missions to just one standard game that you keep replaying over and over. I think that except for our chats last night, or yesterday morning, today morning, for
Today
you.
morning for me.
Let's talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. Yesterday I had a person over who might be, I don't know if moving into help me. We will chat about that, like not me and the whole world, but me and this individual. And the idea is that, they'll be staying and helping me get on top of stuff because there's a lot of organizational stuff I need to get on top of. And yeah, when I get to packing stuff with the Kickstarter games coming in, that's going to be a bit of an ordeal, and I could definitely use some help at that point. That's probably my biggest highlight. In terms of games played, we played quite a few games yesterday. I mean, when I say we, I mean people in this house, just me. But I did play Wavelength with my new friend. I'd like to think that we're friends, whatever will happen. And we played Kitty Cataclysm a couple of times, which is nice because it's quick. And even if you've only got 5 minutes, you can bust it out and then play a second time. And then I played a few levels of Questable, and after our chat, actually this morning, I was like, and so I got up at like 8 o'clock, and I had dozed quite a bit of the evening, not gonna lie, and played a few more missions, and I'm really happy with where we are right now. How about you, Kirsten Lunde? I don't know why I'm using your surname. What's the latest game that you played? What's your recent highlights?
Let's see. Recent highlights. On Saturday last was the last time I felt up to playing some proper games. Because I've been a little under the weather. So it was my husband's birthday weekend. So he got to pick, and he chose for us to try the Crew Mission Deep Sea, which is mission based. So that'll help me grapple with our questions today. And then he got a little stressed about it. There was a little bit of tension about how to make his goals accomplished. So since it was his birthday, he wanted to switch it up to one of his tried and true favorites, which was Lords of Waterdeep, which we really enjoy. Especially, we always play it with the expansions now, and the Scoundrels of Skullport. And we put all of that together and played that. And for the first time ever, he defeated me, which was great. It was, and I promise it wasn't just a gift for his birthday. He legit beat me. So it was a lot of
it
fun.
sounds like over the course of however many games, finally he's managed to work out the winning strategies and raise the level of play to a level that matches you.
Yes, definitely. Well, and I think I think we've talked a little bit before about archetypes, especially in the Magic the Gathering. Those archetypes. He is definitely the one who likes to play around and learn about every possible angle, more than go for the gold every time. So I think he found all the angles and decided a way he wanted to put them together to stomp me this time.
Nice. I mean, I think there's something delightful in playing around with it because I'm still in love with photosynthesis, and as I've been teaching people, and if anyone wants to learn photosynthesis, then I'm happy to do a teaching game on Board Game Arena with as much or as little advice and strategic tips as you would like. So I've always had a definite place where I would start. And whilst I'm still 97% sure that that's the correct answer, I'm starting to have this little seed of doubt. Oh, what if I went there? And the interesting thing is in free players, I think it's almost more simple. It's like, okay, that is clearly the best. But with two players, it's like, well, I can go here and then they could block me. But if they block me, then I could block them in turn. And then sure, we would both be on starting the game with no light at all, but hey, it's a different game, and that would be quite exciting just because, again, it's different. And so I think that, it's interesting how the first player does need to avoid being blocked, but then the second player's got the advantage of stepping in. And there's a definite, I'm continuing to fall in love ever deeper with that game. It's just wonderful. So there are a few, and I wrote to Halmer Hach on Board Game Geek, who wrote back and said, "Yeah, sorry, I don't have time to do anything, but it's lovely to hear that you're enjoying the game. And have you played Evergreen?" And I've technically played Evergreen on Board Game Arena at this point. I'm not such a fan, but I like the interaction. For me, that's the thing that gives it this wonderful, oh, I do that, you do that, oh, and then this planning. It's all about the other people. But let's get on to our main topic, and let's talk about why missions in a game could be a brilliant thing. Brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? So let's take a step back, and how would you define missions in a game?
Well, let's see. I would define them as maybe a subset of a main set of rules that gives you a goal for that play session. I guess would be probably my most succinct way of thinking about it.
So you're saying you're playing with the same game, but then you're given slight tweaks or slight modifications of those rules. I think it's also got to be that the idea is that you play these sequentially. If it's just, hey, do any of these things, to my mind, that's just a bunch of variants. When I say just, I mean, I'm not saying that that's worse or better, but for me, missions have to be something where the proposal to the player is, hey, I would like to take you on this journey, do these things, and then do these things, and then do these, and then carry on. And maybe within each thing, there's a bunch, actually, let's say that we're talking about sequential missions for this stream, because we could also talk about, I can imagine some people say, oh, those achievements, those are kind of like missions, but we're not talking about those. And so why are they brilliant? Let's go back and forth and talk about why they are brilliant. For me, one brilliant thing, stepping outside of what we're working on, is in a big meaty game, like a historical war game, or in some epic Star Wars type thing, then you can tell a bigger story. You can say, okay, in this mission, this thing happened. In this mission, this thing happened. And I would argue that a lot of the months in pandemic, even though that is a legacy game, that is kind of a subset of a mission-based game. Would you agree?
Oh, I totally would.
And then that tells a really strong story because the designer is able to know what's going to happen in a sequential order.
Absolutely. And I think for me, in tandem with that is this excitement and anticipation about what new thing is going to come up in the next mission, or as you mentioned in legacy games, what you're going to open up, right? Or how the successes and failures of your previous one in a legacy game can impact your future missions. So yeah, that's just that excitement and that hit of, oh, can we do this one now? And oh, look what they threw at us. Oh, how cool. And it just feels fresh and new.
Yeah, for sure, that level of anticipation and excitement. And I think it goes into, I think especially for cooperative games, there is a danger of things getting stale. Because with a nice interactive competitive game, then I think that it makes sense that if I won last game, my opponent's going to do something different. If my opponent won last time, then I'm going to probably do something different because I'm not going to play the exact same moves that led to a loss. And so that keeps the game varied and it keeps it interesting. But when you're playing a cooperative game, it feels like there's almost two ways to go at it. Like in Wavelength, which I talked about a couple of minutes ago, and there's so many different scales that you can have. And I went through them all and I've played all of them at least once, at which point I opened the advanced pack. And, with new people, it's all about that communication. But for sure, if I played exactly the same scale with the same people, that would get frightfully dull. But it's because of the amount of content in there. Same as Just One, the number of words allow us to keep playing that. But then the other thing that you can do is missions, I guess, are in their own right a form of new content, a form of a way of saying, hey, here's another thing that you've got to win. Sure, you might have the shuffle of a deck or the deal of some cards to add some variance anyway, but then saying, hey, this is something extra that you need to do, adds even more to it and maintains that challenge.
Absolutely. And is it okay to say, not as a player, but as a designer, a thing that's brilliant about it is it's just so much fun to play in that design space. We are exploring and trying so many different things. It's not the painful letting go of your baby's kind of iteration that can sometimes happen with creating games, right? That can be painful sometimes. This just feels like joy upon joy, because even if it doesn't work, it's like, oh, you know what else we could do, or what we could do instead, or let's test that other one then. There's always some new door or window opening, or we're inspiring each other, and it's just delightful. It's fun.
I absolutely agree. I think there's something lovely when you've got the basic rules of the game and it's like, okay, this is the space that we're working on, but what else can we do? I mean, Phil Walker Harding earlier today talked about the soup for Sushi Go Party, where Sushi Go, for those who don't, I mean, I assume everyone watching this knows, like, one of the simplest drafting games, a totally beautiful game. And yeah, I've actually got a copy just here because I love it that much. But in Sushi Go Party, there was if anyone else has played this card on the same turn as you, you don't score for it. And that's interesting new design space. And in a similar way to card design, in a similar way to working out what extra design space we can eke out, there's something lovely here. I would have a small tangent to just assure people that we aren't throwing everything in, and there have been absolutely lots of things that we've cut. For example, the whole design space of trying to grab a roughly equal number of cards or claim an equal number of cards on the different rows. I mean, that was interesting, but it didn't feel strong enough to be worth the complexity. But then when you've got tens of other levels, you can feel a bit like, well, that's just a small part of the game, and we can almost compare it in a more critical way to the other things. I mean, when you're playing through the things, you are constantly seeing all the different versions of this game. So hopefully by seeing all the different versions as a designer, that then continues to give you ideas, but also allows you to see when something isn't quite as strong as the levels that surround it.
Definitely. Definitely. And I did not mean to suggest we haven't given up some of those babies. We definitely have. But it's much less painful just because there's so many ideas and there's so much room to play and explore that it doesn't feel like a loss so much as a honing, like you say. It's honing to what the game experience is that we're hoping all of the missions will bring, but with that pop of excitement and anticipation and challenge. Yeah.
And yeah, are there any other reasons? Like we've talked about quite a lot of reasons for missions being brilliant. I mean, you know what? I just realized that's another thing is that they can allow people to learn the game more easily. You can almost consider the early missions as a tutorial. I mean, frankly, the first mission of the crew is not the most interesting thing. If someone I knew was a gamer and they were familiar with trick-taking games, I might say, you know what? Let's just skip that mission. Let's skip mission 2. Let's start that mission, I don't know, 3 or 4, whatever I felt was appropriate for that person. But with someone new to games and someone who's maybe learning what a trick-taking game is and trying to wrap their head around all this concept, it allows people to learn at a gentle level for those first few missions.
Absolutely. That is a brilliant thing because it does make the initial teach very easy. Doesn't take very long. I was filling out for Protospiel Online this weekend. I was filling out Questable, and I said 5 minutes. It really does not take me that long to say, here's the L deck, here are the base rules. Let's make 4 words of 4 letters long at least each, and they go, oh, okay. At first, when you bombard them with rules, even short rules, people can get a little in their heads and go, I'm not sure I'm getting it. But as soon as they play that first level, it's like, oh, okay, I have the core rules, and that wasn't nearly so hard as I was worried about. So I find by the second or third level, people start going, give me more, bring it on, I'm ready for more, because they're starting to feel really comfortable.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like 4 to 5 minutes, is that to play one mission or is that for the
That's
teach?
just for the teach.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 5 minutes is the teach, yeah.
Frankly, I think that it's a difficult thing because sometimes knowing how much to tell people, but I normally
sorry, go ahead.
I almost do a running start where I say, okay, just put one card down and say you're making 4-letter words, just say any 4-letter word that starts with these. Then I say to the next person, okay, you need to put it on the left or right, and the word needs to use these in order. And then when they get to a point where they might, maybe, but probably not, want to use the second row, I introduce them to the second row. And so, yeah, even for a mission-based game, there's a little bit more that they would have to read in the rules up front. But with me there to guide them, because it's not a cold playtest, I normally just kind of make that level. I teach the rules as I'm going for whichever the first level is that they play.
Just curious, are you most often playing with people who know the L deck, don't know the L deck, or a mix?
I'm usually playing with a mix, I would say.
I'm often playing with people. Well, now I have more people that are playing ongoing levels with me. But a lot of times when I'm first introducing folks to it, they're not familiar with the L deck. So I usually do a little, let me introduce you to the L deck. It's 48 cards.
Yeah, for me, that's definitely step one to say, oh, yeah, these are the letters, and the number at the bottom tells you how many of each thing there is, and the letters at the top are A, I, N, or S, T, but you don't need to remember all that. Don't worry. I'm just giving you too much information up front, and there's also 6 suits, which doesn't matter at the moment, but it might later on.
That's exactly what I do. Yep. Introducing the L deck, and then the quick rules about each player having an X number of cards and the discard option, and but it doesn't take long at all, and that first level is a perfect. I mean, we've done it enough times now that it just feels like the perfect intro level to
And by
learn the
the
core
first
rules.
level, you mean not
Sorry,
only
the first level of normal.
but also level 11.
Yes, no,
I
level
think
11
at
of
level
normal.
20. So,
Right.
is there any other reasons why missions in games are brilliant, or shall we crack on? Is there anything else to think of?
Do we want to mention that there is, as because we are going to be talking about scaling difficulty, that it does provide an opportunity to have accessibility for a broader range or enjoyment for a broader range. So we can make sure it's accessible for folks that are less comfortable with word games or less familiar, in our case. And the crew, as you said, starts really simply. So it makes it really accessible for people who don't know trick-taking games, but then can get really complex and challenging for people who love trick-taking games, or for people who have learned to love them by playing all those missions. So that's a great opportunity to appeal to a broad audience and share the joy of different kinds of games with a broader audience.
Yes, 100%. And I think that, let me back to that banner. Yeah, having different jumping on points and saying, hey, by the way, you can do this. And it's kind of like a variant, but allowing people to skip the tutorial if they want is a really lovely thing. As always, if anyone watching has any comments of their own, do you think that missions are brilliant? Why do you think missions are brilliant? Or if you don't, like, now that we've passed the brilliant thing section, we're allowed to have some more negativity. So let us know your thoughts. And of course, feel free to ask questions. I always try to reply to every respectful question or comment that I see. And as always, from like follow. Anyway, so the idea of making missions, I think we've talked about what's a mission-based game and why it might be a great idea. Let's offset that by why is it maybe a bad idea? Why is it maybe not suitable for your game? I mean, what are the challenges of making a mission? Like, one thing that occurs to me is that it is asking more of the players. It's kind of like a bigger investment. It's saying, hey, you need to play this and then play the other thing. And like, I don't know if I'm ever going to win level 50 of the crew with my friends Chris and McCall. I mean, we're at level 20, I think, around this point, and we would just kind of carry on whenever we bring it out every few months. And it is a joy to play, don't get me wrong, but if I was super hyper focused on getting to the end, that might actually be off-putting because there's just so much content. And if I'm telling the truth, when I look at Gloomhaven, I think, you know what, this maybe just isn't a game for me.
I can totally see that could feel overwhelming, and that there's a cognitive load there. We're asking them to learn a new thing. If it's 50 missions, we could be asking them to learn a new thing or refresh their memory on something, and that's even more challenging now. 50 times, that's or 49 times. The first one maybe not so bad, but we're asking them to take on quite a lot of cognitive load. They're not all at once, and we have to be aware of that. But it is definitely asking folks a lot to get a new rule all the time, or to change the way they're thinking about the deck, as we do with Questival.
I mean, one thing that we didn't actually talk about being brilliant, I mean, going back to that, is that, again, on Monday with Phil, we were talking about how a lot of people just do not like score-based cooperative games. If it's a case of, hey, what's the highest score you can get? A lot of people don't find that emotionally satisfying. A lot of people really want the win or loss. And by having missions, you can sort of have that satisfaction of, I won, but then keep having more and more additional stuff to go for. But conversely, the next mission in theory should be a little bit harder, but it's about that balance of, can we get it to be an increase in difficulty? Can we make sure that it isn't super overwhelming to the other person? And yeah, that can be an easy thing to, it can be I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's just a challenge when designing them. Any other challenges or anything?
I think with and some of them just overlap with co-ops, probably, where you have the challenge of people at different comfort levels, or making sure that everybody wants to move on to the next level. Everybody's feeling comfortable enough to move on to the
missions, of
next
course,
level.
can be used in competitive games as well, like I
Yeah,
mentioned.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think you're right that if someone's very good at taking in information quite quickly, even in a competitive game, that might be like, well, you're just going to keep winning, because I do better when we play a game for the fifth time, but essentially we're never playing this for the fifth time, which can also be
Right.
kind of sad, because I remember, what was it, Reiner Knizia's My City, where there were a couple of I'm going to call them missions in that game, where it was really interesting and it was really fun. And then we moved on. And it felt kind of sad, because I was like, oh, that was really nice to play. And I kind of wish that we'd stuck with that. Of course, being a legacy game, it has the downside that you can't easily come back to it.
Right.
And that is a slight problem of that medium. But I do wish that it had been a case of, hey, let's just carry on taking this at our own pace. And if we're enjoying this level, and if more than half the players, if we generally all agree to say, yeah, this is something we want to replay again, then let's do it. And I know that one of the players on Friday, Elena, said, you know what, I would like to play all of the levels that I just played once more before I progressed, because I'm still not super comfortable. I would like to play it through and feel a bit more familiar before I go on to level 11, because we'd been playing level 6 to 10. And sometimes there can be this social pressure to then keep going. And so if some people want to keep going, but some people want to slow down, that can be difficult.
It can. I would volunteer to play with Elena, that's for sure, because that was really gratifying to hear that not feeling comfortable enough to move on didn't mean I want to stop playing. That was really gratifying to hear. That what it meant was, I'm enjoying this. I want to play it some more and replay what I've already played in terms of the challenges of the missions, but it will feel different just to get that comfort level. That's what we're striving for, right? That's among some of the challenges of mission-based, is making sure that they're interesting enough, but not so difficult that nobody wants to move on or people feel defeated early on. It's
And I think that yeah, that's the ideal, isn't it? Because with missions, when you're making these missions, there can be the temptation to sort of make something almost disposable. And I think that, sure, if someone plays Yogi just once in their life and they're like, hey, that was really good, but then never plays it again, well, I'd rather that they were inspired to play it again. But even if they've got good memories of it, obviously that's still a win. And similarly with Questable or any other mission-based game, if people are playing a mission and they say, oh yeah, I've got good memories of that, but I want to keep going, and once I get to the end, you know what, I'll move on to the other games because there's so many other games out there. I totally get that. I mean, I am someone who loves to dabble and loves to try new things, but ideally, you want to also make the games enjoyable to people who are going to replay it over and over. For, like, if I start on level 1 with someone who's maybe less comfortable with word games, it should still be enjoyable and interesting to me to play with them. And there should be, yes, enough variance that, oh, maybe I've forgotten exactly what happened in those earlier levels. Maybe there's slight tweaks. And unless we have anything else, do we have anything else that we want to say about the challenges? Because if not, we can get into how we solved some of these things, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about, or if we want to just talk about it in the solutions about the challenges of the difficulty, and as we're getting comfortable and playing, and you know the LDEC better than anybody else, and I'm getting to know it really well now too. So our judgment of how difficult something can be very skewed because of our comfort and knowledge with the deck. So figuring out how those will work in a way that's not suddenly leaping people into diabolical from normal. We want to make sure that those difficulty levels are ramping up correctly. So that's one of our challenges that we'll talk about solving.
I think that's completely correct, and I think that's something. I'm not sure how integral that is to mission-based games. I mean, look, I hope you don't mind me challenging what you say in general.
No, that's quite all right.
I think that this is anything where in a cooperative game, if there's you against other people, then you might end up constantly raising the challenge of the AI, of the objective, and say, yeah, it's possible. And unless that's, okay, this is the hardest difficulty level, sure, go crazy on that, go like be extreme as you want, but then in terms of the starting difficulty, whatever you cite as normal should be very approachable, and it's challenging to keep that in mind. Similarly, there's, as well as difficulty creep, as the designers, as the developers get to know the pieces better than anyone else in the world, and this is obviously something that you see much more in video games, where sometimes the testers are just the best players ever because they've been forced to play this game a ridiculous number of hours. But then also there's complexity creep, where you might be thinking, well, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do one more thing. Yeah, I can do one more thing. But then for a new player, they're seeing all of this at once. And it really warmed my heart that, like, last night when I was saying, oh, this is kind of challenging, you were like, you know what, let's just knock it down, and from 17 or more, let's move it back to 15 or more cards, which makes a massive difference if you're making 4-letter words, because then essentially you only need to make 4 words rather than 5 potentially. And also bearing in mind, okay, how much are we changing from level to level? Because we can understand that, we've grokked it, we've internalized all of these rules, but for someone else who's coming to it for the first time, it's like, okay, at this level, I'm taking out these cards, and now I need to think about what letters are not in the deck, and maybe this is a new skill that I've not really explored much, remembering to not use letters in words. But now I also need to remember, okay, I've got to gather slightly more words, and I've also got to remember this new restriction where I need to think about the numbers, and, you know, whereas for us that might be totally fine, but then I think it's also true of a lot of puzzle design that as designers, whatever we think of as too easy is probably actually correct.
Yes, I did some designing of escape room-esque lessons with homeschool co-op groups. So we did an American Revolution one, and I did one on geocaching. And I kept going, okay, this seems easy enough, but I'm designing it. I'm really familiar with the material. I'm the one that's pulling all of the research into it. So I had to give a lot of clues and learn how to scale some of those down, and how to give extra hints in the actual experience rather than them having to ask me all the time. So yeah, definitely it's easy to make it too hard. You know, and what's funny is I think my favorite just anecdotal example of that is the reaction, and I tried to describe it to you in my message to you once, the reaction to just taking out the S. Just taking an S away from people, and the whole collective, what? You're taking what away from me? And as soon as you do that, their brain has already shut down to, don't give them another new rule. Don't tell them something else new they have to remember, because you've just blown their minds by stealing their S. So it's always a good thing for us to kind of gauge by, like, how much have we blown their minds with that new element? Can we afford to give them another one, or should we go easy?
And then I think something worth talking about, if I can bring up this banner which I just typed, is the difficulty curve, and also the novelty and familiarity curve. So I suggested to you my favorite difficulty curve, which is kind of, it goes up, but it's got spikes, and I feel strongly that there should be spikes. My favorite game, okay, I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a Game & Watch collection on the Game Boy Color. So not the original Game & Watches, but the revamp of them on the Game Boy Color. Now, the very interesting thing that they did here, so this was them bringing back a bunch of their old Game & Watches. If you're familiar with that old Nintendo thing where it was like you had this little console, but it only played one game, and that was all it played. And then obviously those went out of fashion because why would you have that when you could get something that plays multiple games? That's even better. So yeah, once like the Game Boy came about, there's no point in it. And then Game Boy Color came about, and it was like, okay, let's bring about these things. And you could either play the original mode, which was trying to be as close as possible, and a slightly revamped mode. And what revamped mode did is I can express the difficulty, like this, just the pure speed of it, because that was pretty much all they changed. In terms of, it was almost like the first digit plus the second. Well, it was the hundredth digit plus the tens digit, if you see what I mean, in terms of difficulty. So if you were at level 100, it would be more difficult than level 0, but it would be easier than level 90. So you'd have these momentary, oh, it's getting more difficult, it's getting more difficult. Oh my gosh, there's a moment of relief. And then you kind of felt like you achieved something. You felt like you were being rewarded in those moments of satisfaction. And I've noticed this in that having those spikes, whilst in theory people think a difficulty curve should be a straight line, I think that actually leads to less enjoyable, less interesting play. I think that you want some carefully calculated spikes to have these moments of, oh, this is going on, and some moments of relief. But when I suggested this, you were completely on board with doing this, of having these boss levels. How did you feel about that? Was that something that you'd considered?
I absolutely thought that was a great idea, partly because I also have been playing The Crew. That's probably obvious because I was inspired by The Crew to create this game. But we've stopped at a certain level. We're in the 30s somewhere. But when we go back to it, I have to pick where I'm going to go back to. And I loved the idea of this structured version of those spikes so that it kind of has those checkpoints. Now we're in video game references too, right? Those checkpoints where you go and you can say, oh, well, even if you stop in the middle of a chapter, which is in our design for folks who don't know, is 5 missions together forms a chapter. So that first one is a good onboard, and then it increases to the boss roughly, and then the first mission of the next chapter is another good onboarding. And I think that's great for something where we're trying to provide a lot of content for people that they won't be able to do in one session. They can't sit down. I mean, I suppose we could have them. I wouldn't mind. Maybe we can do that at some point. We'll have stream a marathon of us trying to play all 50 missions. But I just got bold there, didn't I? But
no, why not? August the 1st, 2024.
There we go.
I'll be in Thailand, so I'll be closer to your time zone, won't I?
Hey, that'll work. Yeah. I have no idea how long that could potentially take. I mean, we'd be a little faster than other folks, I think, but most people are not going to sit and do it in one session.
We could do it, but some of those diabolical levels do take a few things.
If we leave those to the end, we'll be in really bad shape. We've been at this for 8 hours. Yeah.
I'm going to share some of these things. So this is not really intended for public consumption. So these are not but you can see, like, easy level 1, you just make 5 words. And that's it, like 5 3-letter words. So you've got to use at least 15 cards. And then you start taking out the letters, avoiding duplicate things, having blockers where you can't use EL, and then you have the mini deck, which I love as a concept. And then suddenly it goes back, you put the I and T back in, and then it's just claim 17 or more cards. And so it's basically exactly the same. Technically, you might have to make 1 more word, but it's now, hey, let's count how many you have to do, and then take out the ON, claim 17 or more cards, and then no ON or E, claim exactly 17 cards. And we've been talking about how, okay, maybe it should just be no ONE, and if we're using no ONE, maybe it should be no ON, claim 17 cards actually. I'm just going to type that while we're working on it. Because, like, again, when you say it's adding one thing, doing something exactly does change it a lot. But then maybe level 9 is too much. I don't know. But
you can see how much thought we have put into how much cognitive load we're asking of the players. And then when we're playtesting, I know you do this too, I'll ask how they felt it was in terms of difficulty. So we're kind of keeping an eye on how people are rating it and how difficult they find each level. And then what was I going to say? It's not enjoyment, but there's something about, I ask about, it's partially enjoyment, but it's also, did that feel different enough from the previous level? Did it feel like a different challenge to the previous level, as opposed to we just changed one thing and it just felt the same, right? Because I know you're so good about asking those questions of playtesters, but I've been really gratified. Does is shaking her head, but she sends me these audio recordings that are oh, you're being shy. Yeah.
That's me.
Bashful. Yes. No, these recordings that Ben sends are so great. Good. I'm glad you're accepting it, because they're so great, and there's these great questions asked and in a great format. So I'm aspiring to get that good, but I really am conscious of making sure that these levels feel like a new challenge, not just we've been riffing some new ideas and it just feels the same.
And in all seriousness, to big up myself, like, I do think that I am pretty good, but we are all always learning. And, today I actually saw something, I think it was by Catherine Dreyer, who asked that the question that they always ask is, if you were to describe this game to a friend tomorrow, how would you describe it? Which I think is such a brilliant thing.
Oh, what a great question. Kat's a Kiwi.
Yes.
She's moved to Portland. Or does she prefer they moved to Portland?
Opposites, because one of you like, in terms of how you moved. But,
Kat's escaped to Portland, and I've escaped to New Zealand. But we did cross paths here before.
Again, going back, like when you get to level 11, sure, now it's making 4-letter words, but now you don't have any extra restrictions. And then again, when it gets to level 16, when it gets to level 16, at that point, we're actually starting people, even on the first level of a chapter, there are additional things. And now it's actually, okay, there's level 21. Hey, not only are you doing this, but it is called tricky at that point. So we expect to be tricky. So the drop, I think it is a slight drop in difficulty.
It is,
but it's always hard to tell, because, I wrote, after playing it, that level, I played level 21 and level 22 after playing the previous ones, and level 21 for me felt basically the same, but the challenge as level 20. But then when I played level 22, it then suddenly felt easier, maybe because I'd gotten into it, you know what I mean? Even for one person playing it, it's so hard to gauge those difficulties. So ultimately, what we have to do is to make it contextual and think about the levels before, the levels afterwards. We playing them on different days, even like literally the following day, is actually not a great way to check it, because it's all about, I think, if I'm gauging the difficulty of one particular level with some other people, I want them to play, at least a couple before and a couple after, ideally.
Yeah, definitely. I have been doing some skipping
and
to kind of gauge that, and then going back and trying to do sequential again, so that we can get both perspectives, right? So we can get the perspective of kind of out of order, how difficult does this feel? In sequence order, did that feel too easy? So we're getting some kind of a variety of checkpoints there, of a variety of feedback.
And we're
and
still
sometimes I
like,
start at 11 just to introduce the game to people, and then but I need them to try something harder. So I jump people up a little bit if they're comfortable with word games, just because we're needing to play test at different levels. So,
I mean, this morning I had a weird idea, which I don't know if this is too much, but I was almost thinking, imagine if it was like a really bad choose your own adventure book. So I say really bad because like the choose your own adventure story shouldn't be part of it. Shouldn't be like the main draw, but like it says, okay, now you've done this. Now, do you rush straight into the fight, or do you take a moment to breathe? And if you take a moment to breathe, then like you get a slightly easier level and it moves you to the next level. But if you rush straight into the fight, then maybe it jumps you 2 or 3 ahead, something like that. And then like I think that in a playful way, reminding people that they can skip things might actually be quite nice. But that was just the idea that I had, I think, literally this morning. So that could sort of work. And having a choose your adventure book with the thing would actually make perfect sense. And then it might actually also make more of the story. But I do think that whilst to get the best thing of, okay, is the sequence of levels good? Obviously, playing all of them with as many people as possible in order is the best way, but skipping around, that's maybe how a lot of people will play. Skipping around, maybe that's allowing us to check the levels that we really need to be checked. Skipping around allows us to brainstorm new things and come up with new content more quickly. But I wanted to then talk about like almost the counterpart to difficulty is the novelty and familiarity, because novelty does add some difficulty in a lot of ways. If we say, hey, here's something new and something new and something new, that's obviously more challenging. Then I'm actually going to look at level 21 and 22, where I think here it's got like 21 for starting a chapter. This is quite meaty. 5 cards in a column, and you have to clear the entire table. That's basically what's going on. And so you need to make at least 5 words. There's a lot of upfront information, and if you just kind of work on 1 or 2 of them at a time, you'll probably get through it. But it can feel really overloading, especially because you've got to have 5-letter words. But then at the same time, even though it's kind of scary if you're playing it when you're a little bit tired or whatever, and it's like, whoa, there's 5 things to think about, it also gives you the flexibility to make use of, I've got the IQ, okay, I'll put it in here. But then level 22, it keeps all the same rules. So 5 cards in the column, 5-letter words. You've got to clear the table, but you remove the S and you deal another 5 cards to the side for blockers. And this is like 2 new things. And it's not like removing cards. That's something you've probably seen before. Blockers, if you've played through the levels sequentially, that's something you've seen before. So it has that familiarity, but it's saying, hey, we're mixing these things together in a new way. And I think there's something lovely about saying, hey, you've done this thing. Now do this same thing with more. Do you know what I mean?
yes, I've really enjoyed us putting some of those things together that have been familiar, because, and we consciously again have chosen, we want to introduce the numbers on the cards once per chapter. We want to, once per chapter. We're trying to make sure that we're introducing concepts. We remove letters in most of the chapters, although there's one where we don't remove any, and we're like, oh, let's see what you do. What can we do if we're not removing any? So we're introducing those concepts and letting people play those and get familiar with those. And then when we add a new element, we go, oh, so what if you added those other things you learned before to this new element? Do you think you can do it now? Which has been so much fun. I feel like we're making just these potions, that's sort of been our theme anyway. But we're like, we'll take a little of this, and we'll take a little of this, and we'll take a little of this, and they're all ingredients, but we'll see if it's something tasty and fun, or if we have to chuck that one and try something else. But I do think we've been really talking. We talked through it, especially when we were brainstorming most recently. We talked so much about those sorts of, like when you mentioned saying that this seemed a little difficult, or when we said, well, if we're saying claim this many cards and adding other things, maybe we should keep with claim this many cards so they don't have to think of a new element for that piece because they're getting some other new elements. And I think we're with making those as conscious choices and really thinking about what that will feel like to the player. We're getting into good spots with that. But familiarity is one of the things we hitch on with that, isn't it? We love creating the new idea, but we try to give the players something comfortable in there to play with.
I mean, I'm looking through the things. 1, 2, we've got 8. We've got 10 levels currently. With no definite ideas, if you know what I mean. So 8 things in the fiendish category and 2 things in the diabolical category. But then once we've worked out and we've cut out so many levels and we've got a bunch of ideas written at the bottom of our spreadsheets, which is, hey, here are some things that we can think about later. But I feel confident that, by the end of the summer, at least, we will definitely have 50 levels that we're fairly comfortable with, and it'll be a case of finessing them and making this a super awesome thing. I can really see...
I want to say it. Can I say it the opposite way? We've finished 40. We've filled in something for 40 of the levels, as opposed to we have 10 empty spots.
No.
Because I want to celebrate that we've come so far. I don't think I thought we were going to be this far at this stage.
I will also say that not only have we filled in something for 40 levels, because we filled in something for more than 40 of the levels, because there's a couple which just have half thought out ideas, but we've got 40 playable levels. Let's put it that way. 40 levels right now that we are really happy with.
Yeah, and I feel like that's quite an accomplishment.
40 levels that we are happy with. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it feels like we're ahead of where we thought we'd be at this point. At least certainly where I thought we might be. Because when we first started talking about it, I think the key word was ambitious. It's an ambitious project for 50 missions and making them feel unique and managing that difficulty curve and stuff. And boy, I feel like we've hit some grooves and really come a long way with them.
I mean, I think that a big part of that is, inspired by my friends. I think calling Matt Leacock a friend is pushing it a bit much, but Matt Leacock and Matteo Manapace, who had a weekly conference call for Daybreak, and we've done that, and I've been with it's basically been with your assistance. Like, if you had not been involved, like, you would have been welcome to not be involved, but I think that it would have taken me maybe this time next year to get to where we are right now, if you know what I mean. Because 2 minds not only have twice as much thinking capability, but also are kind of bouncing off stuff, like the whole conversation of hey, maybe we don't need to clear the table where it came from. That came from you, but then from me it was like, oh, what if you sometimes needed to clear the table? What would that look like? Maybe you start with a whole bunch of things, and just for this one level you've got multiple rows, but you just need to clear the table. And just kind of each of us sparks things, and then you'll say something that I'll develop, or I'll say something that you'll develop, and it's been very much a back and forth. And it also, what I find really useful is just how energizing it is. And like, firstly, how energizing it is to chat and to go and brainstorm all these things and to have yay, we did that. Now we're able to chat about it. But also it gives me a checkpoint to the week where, frankly, I did some solo testing yesterday that if I didn't have you to chat to, I probably wouldn't have done that, and I would have kind of felt guilty about other things that I still didn't do, but I might not have done them anyway. And I'd be like, oh, I'll do that later on, it's not a big thing. But having these minor checkpoints is a really useful thing. And it doesn't mean I need to spend hours and hours on it. It might literally just be, okay, quickly play through this for half an hour or 40 minutes. And honestly, I'm really enjoying these levels. It kind of feels like a bit of self-care until I get to a badly thought out thing. And it's like, oh no, I'm totally messed, like as a player, I totally messed this up. But especially for what should be the normal things, and it feels like generally it's like, yeah, I'm able to do this, and I'm feeling a little bit of success, but I'm just enjoying the emotions of going through and experiencing all of it, because it's one thing to ponder it in your mind and to theory craft it, but yeah, this game, because it can be played by 1, 2, 3, or 4, whilst I have to be mindful of the multiplayer game when I'm solo testing, it is a lovely thing to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to do that. This is going to be almost my time to myself, and I enjoy that.
Yeah, I do too, and I've done the same thing where I've gone, you know what, I'm talking to Beth tomorrow, and I'm this far away from bedtime. Although I have to admit, I mistakenly did that once with a diabolical level. I stayed up too late, but but I was like, I've got this long till bedtime, and I'm talking with Bez tomorrow. You know what? I want to just play some solo for before, so I can test some of these. And it's not just to make it clear for everybody. It's not Bez putting pressure on me, and it's not me putting pressure on Bez, because we don't do that to each other at all. It's more like you say, we're enjoying it. And it's like, oh, what am I going to talk to Bez about tomorrow? Oh, let's talk about this level too.
Yeah,
there's other things I could talk about from earlier in the week that I did, but I want to try this level too, and so we can talk about this. It's more of a joy, and like you said, it's almost a self-care. Yeah.
There's absolutely been times when, you've not done anything or I've not done anything, and as you say, there's no pressure or anything, which I do appreciate. But there is like the reward almost of, well, I get to do this, and then I get to talk about it, which is really nice.
Exactly.
And we've had, I think, maybe 2, maybe 3 chats that we've skipped, but there's been one chat where neither of us had done anything, but we kind of chatted about other stuff for like half an hour, which was still fine. And just like, yeah, well, do you have any idea? No, not really. No, not really. Well, we'll do some more stuff for next week. And but there are different priorities and different opportunities for each of us, and we need to be mindful and considerate of that. Because I think this is when we got to the challenges of making levels, frankly, it is more work than just making one game. And I think that when this comes out, like, sure, it'll be like 1st of August 2024, it'll be like a PDF that people or whatever that people can download and play. But I'm also thinking it would be nice to have like a physical little thing, whether that even means like more, it's less of a short instruction sheet and more of like a tiny little book that you almost put on your shelf and then you carry around with your deck. But regarding the actual form factor, that's a way off, being determined and everything. But it does feel like there's something really intense there, and something where it's almost like making a game and then making a sequel and then making a follow-up and making an expansion and then making all of these things, and then it's like just a tight little package. And that is challenging, but it can also be so rewarding and so brilliant.
Yes, it has been all of those things.
And
it's still ambitious of us, but we're doing great. I'm so proud of how far we've come.
Do you have anything else that you would like to say about this topic before we finish up?
I don't think so. Debt owed to the crew, actually, for inspiring this, because I know there's been mission-based games. We talked about how you could really say that about campaign games and legacy games, but it was really the crew in that tight package that really inspired me to make a word game that was like that. And I think they did something wonderful that a lot of us will have fun playing in as a design space.
I mean, it's like how Pandemic was not the first cooperative game, but it really popularized the medium, and
Yeah.
it encouraged a lot more designers to play in that space.
Yeah.
So, Kirsten, do you have a question for me? Because we've chatted a lot, I've asked you lots of stuff, but what is your question of the day? Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Question of the day.
Have you done this one? I'm sure you've done this one before. If you were an animal, what animal would you be?
Does it have to be a real animal or it can be a made-up animal?
It can be whatever you want.
Oh, I'm going to say a flying agenda. So this is something that I just invented, but
Oh,
like an agenda, but it's kind of like it's got like a lion's face, and it's like a big red mane, and it's
sure.
kind of spotty like a giraffe, but it's can live underwater also. It's amphibious, and it's got squiddy bits.
Squiddy bits. I love
Yes,
it.
like tentacles.
Yes,
More
yes.
octopus bits. But then it's also got wings, so I can fly. I'm like the best thing. So I can go dive deep into the water, or I can fly. And then it is a little bit difficult, maybe taking off, but I'm up to the challenge, and I can just soar through. And I'm like about this big.
Awesome. You know what's so delightful about that, Beth, is that reminds me of a creature that my Sophie just told me she drew for her teacher. That has this childlike wonder about it, and I think that is amazing. I just think it's delightful. Perfect.
How
I
about
hope
you?
you've drawn it. Have you drawn it yet? Because now I
I'm
want a
going to
drawing.
draw it.
Okay, yeah, I am going to hold you to that. I really want to see it.
I will draw it right now. What would you like to be?
Well, I guess I'm kind of biased about something that's been happening with friends lately, and a dear friend of mine and I have realized a similar feeling in totally different situations. It's interesting when you empathize with people and you correlate it to what you most closely remember feeling the same way, but it's a totally different situation. And so I'm going to have to go with a bear, a mama bear. Because that feeling is protective. And so protective and upset, and yet trying to be nurturing and still empathetic, to be understanding of other humans and what's going on with them. But, when they've made mistakes where it concerns people I love, making sure my rage doesn't overcome that trying to be empathetic with them. What?
You take care of your young.
Oh, I do. It's not just my young, it's my tribe, the tribe, the chosen tribe. If somebody messes with you, they better not cross my path, Bess. You're in the tribe. So
Oh, that's
I love it.
this is
Mine's not nearly as fun as that. I love it so very much. And Sophie would adore it. I'm gonna have to show her. If nothing else, I'm gonna show her this section.
Duck, giraffe, lion, octopus.
I love it.
Because it has to have the wings that can work in water, obviously. But yes, we'll see what you're up to. You can share, but if you want to. After this stream, I'm going to chop some aubergine and maybe garlic and onion and prepare it for a friend who's coming over soon. And we are probably going to be playing a lot of cooperative games today for just a couple of hours. We might actually be playing a wee bit of Questable. We might be playing Bandido and potentially Codenames Duet, but with the pictures cards, and we'll see how that goes. And I am still making and enjoying my dish, which is aubergines, baby potatoes chopped up, put in the baby potatoes, fry the onions, have a spoon of mustard, a spoon of chili, spoon of peanut butter, put in some water to kind of stir it and stop the pan from burning, and then some garlic, and toss in the onions and mix it all together. And hello, Sate, I hope that you're generally well. But yes, that is what I'm up to. And then I'm going to try and get a lot of work done in the evening. What about you? What are you up to?
Well, very shortly, I will my head will hit the pillow and I will go to sleep because it's getting late here in New Zealand. And I need some extra sleep to keep fighting off a little bug. And then tomorrow I will be playtesting in a weekly group that I am lucky enough to enjoy. And then in the afternoon, I'll be talking to a marketing company about potentially helping market Ovation for launch on June 20th. I'm excited and scared both. I'm very excited, and a little scared.
It is just over to your right.
Yes. Yeah, I cheated and put it right over my shoulder this time. I just love how the cover came out. And I love representation on it because the stats on representation on board game covers need some changing. So I'm really happy about it. And then this weekend is Proto Spiel Online. What was that?
It is still very white, though.
Well, this is a black composer. His father was white, so his skin tone is a little light. But my artist is a wonderful black woman, and so she used his actual pictures to create Joseph Boulogne, the Chevalier de Saint-Georges. And actually, a movie about his life is out right now in theaters called Chevalier. And he's a fascinating man, a composer, a fencer. He taught Marie Antoinette. He was really important in the French Revolution, and it is very possible that Alexandre Dumas based one of the Three Musketeers characters on his life.
Oh,
He's
wow.
a fascinating person in history, and everybody should know about Joseph Boulogne. So yes. And then actually, if you see the hands that are applauding, we have diversity and representation with the hands that are applauding too.
Nice.
That's been really important to me.
I mean, it's good that you're mindful of all of this. And Absolutely. Of course, to everyone out there, if you want to check this out and follow it, I have just put in the links. And so please, at this point, let's recap and wrap up before we finish up. We talked about Kitty Cataclysm, enjoying that, Wavelength, potential housemates, Lords of Waterdeep, finally winning, bringing about a story, excitement, surprise, anticipation with missions, maintaining the challenge, the variability, exploring all this cool design space, but it also allows you to be more critical as a designer because you can just chop things and understand things and compare them to the other versions of themselves. It allows you to do tutorializing and potentially have different jumping on points. The challenges are to ensure it doesn't get too overwhelming for people, too much learning, making sure that the difficulty increases at a decent level. Sometimes some of the players might think, oh, we want to move on. And then one person says, you know what, I kind of want to stick with where I am. And that can obviously cause arguments, but then so can choosing your game. So we talked about it being replayable, and gauging difficulty can be a challenging thing. We talked about difficulty and complexity creep and being really mindful of that. We talked about the analog of making it kind of like putting together little potions, and maybe that's a metaphor that we should put into the story. We talked about the debt to the crew, and we talked about, had a little look at levels 21 and the different jumping on points and exactly what we should do. And then we talked about what animals we would like to be, Kirsten being a mama bear and me being a flying agenda, which you can tell that I've still not thrown away a bit of paper from last UK Games Expo, which probably tells you how much. I mean, to be fair, I've finally used it as scrap paper, so waste not, want not. Eh?
Right.
But,
reuse, recycle.
Yes, I reused it, and then I'm going to put it through recycling. But please, if this has been useful to you, share, spread the word. Thank you very much, everyone, especially Kirsten Lunde for being here. If you want to check me out, I am Stuff by Bez in all of the places. And if you want to, and stuffbybez.com/streams will tell you what I'm generally up to. And in 2 weeks' time is going to be my epic 1000th episode. Our Kirsten will be joining, and you'll be talking about being part of communities.
Yes, and I'm just realizing, is it too late to say a brilliant thing I did this week? Oh gosh, I can't believe I didn't mention it. I just want to shout out to Dan Hughes sporadically board with Mike and Dan, and Cora Quest, which is right next to Ovation, because that's a special design as well to me. Dan played Ovation with me just online, and it was delightfully fun. I do want to get him to try Questival next. But I never had so much fun being called a swine in my life. He said, where did that card go? You took it, you swine. It was just, I had so much fun with him.
I love that you've got this very American trying to be British accent.
I wasn't trying to do an accent, but it was sort of trying to give the tone without doing a bad British accent.
I mean, I'm watching this one show where it parodies Britain. Like, it's not even a loving parody. It's just a terrible parody of Britain, but it's an American thing, but I'm genuinely enjoying it. It's like, yeah, anyway.
I'm so sorry to do that aside, but I was like, I can't believe I forgot that was one of my highlights.
To skedaddle. So yes. If you want to check out Kirsten, then
all those links.
And for now, pardon me, only thing left to say is, as always, lots of love and bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye, so blue, 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 bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.